Hello and welcome back to another video on this channel. Today I'm doing something a bit different. Instead of talking philosophy and those things, today I'm actually going to be doing the political compass test. I have to give credit to my good friend Opinions in Dispute, who did this on his channel, taking the political compass test. And I thought, for a change, let's have something a bit light-hearted. Let me take this test and see exactly where I lean on the economic and the social scale. In my opinion, I like to see myself as quite a bit of a liberal, not in the sense of I have very leftist beliefs, but more so the case that I like generally give people freedom and let them choose their paths, and by choosing their paths also get to choose their destiny, which of course then ties into their eternal ramifications and has significant impacts. But that is all about free choice, and I really like supporting that free choice. So of course that comes in with like boundaries, and we'll see that later is the political compass goes. So first question, if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity than the interests of transnational corporations. Of course, it's very difficult to say what, or like these tests are quite weird, and sometimes it's not a good representation because sometimes what the thing here is actually saying does not actually have your preference. To me, I don't think it should necessarily serve humanity or serve transnational corporations. I don't really believe in either one of them. Rather, I believe that it should allow or boost a free market and trade over multiple different countries. I think that's perhaps the best way to go. But if I had to say something about this thing, I do think it should serve humanity if I had to choose between the two. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I strongly disagree. Although I do support my country in the sense I am proud of my country, as you will see in the next one, I don't think that you should support a country just because you're part of that country. I don't think that reasoning is any good, nor is it very helpful. So now this is no one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I completely disagree with it. It's like choosing your parents. You can't choose your parents, but you could still be very proud of their achievements and their impact to your life. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Well, I mean, that's a very interesting thing. It's like, well, what do you mean by having superior qualities? Does it mean that one race is superior in all senses of that word than another race? Strong? Of course not. But do I think that there are superior qualities, like maybe parts of our history or parts of the tradition which are superior to other races? I definitely have to agree that I think that we might be better than other countries in certain areas of our history or tradition and some qualities, whereas other cultures might be better than China or Hong Kong in other types of qualities. So I think that's very balanced. I think everyone can say that is true for their own country, and as a result, I strongly agree with this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I strongly disagree with it. You can have the enemy of your enemy being quite against you, or you might not like that. For example, the enemy of my enemy is not my friend in the case of USA and Soviet Russia. Although they were fighting against Hitler, who was the enemy of the enemy, they weren't necessarily friends, as you can see in the Cold War afterwards and in the different conferences at Potsdam, Tehran, and other stuff like that. You realize that, yes, they did have to get together and work together in order to take over or take out the greater fear, but at the same time there was competitiveness within them, especially between the capitalist West and the communist East, so there was a gap there, and as a result I don't agree at all with the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Well, that is an interesting question because of course you could say that international law is supreme, but at the same time, sometimes military action is required. I think you have to take that in a case-to-case circumstance, and sometimes international law, I don't really agree with it. For example, sometimes the law of engagement, there's sometimes where you could only shoot someone after they've shot at you, but then the problem is that, well, what if they shoot at you and you seeing the guy run at you with a gun, but you can't shoot them because they haven't shot at you first, then, well, that's a bit of a problem, right? So I think that sometimes international law that is denied is sometimes justified, because I read a story a while back, I think this was 3 or 4 years ago, a helicopter of, I think it was a Black Hawk with Navy SEALs in it, was transporting troops, and the Taliban or whoever it was, I can't remember who was, shot at that helicopter, came out in full sight of everyone with the RPG, but they couldn't do anything about it because of the laws of engagement. So, and I think that if they shot that Taliban, I wouldn't say it was unjustified. So, well, I have to say I agree here. there is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Yes, I do believe that. I think that there is a worrying fusion of entertainment and information. You should go for information for one thing and entertainment with another. That's not to say you can learn a lot from entertainment. For example, reading Dostoevsky is entertaining and you can learn a lot of information from it. But at the same time, I do think it's worried about how people like to use entertainment as their way to subconsciously share information and their political agendas, which I think is definitely dangerous. And as a result, I say there is a worrying fusion occurring here. So let's check the next page. Now the economy. Now, I'm not very good at economy. I don't really understand too much economy, but we will see how it goes. People are ultimately divided more by class and nationality. I strongly disagree. I don't think that people should even be divided by anything in the sense that I think that we should take the merit of an individual person or at the most his surrounding family or his economic situation. I think that's how people are divided, but not really class, because, well, it's very easy to say, well, it's a class warfare, it's a class struggle. That's a Marxian idea, but that's very dangerous, because the moment you say, well, it's a class struggle, then you have a very good excuse to oppress and antagonize or attack other sources or other classes, which is very dangerous and could lead to things like racism. And of course, you can say, well, dividing people by nationality could lead to racism, but I have to say at the same time that there's perhaps more similarities between people within a nationality than a class. For example, the traditions, the values, and the culture is normally more similar as a person, and we should judge them by that instead, and their beliefs, instead of what economic class they are, because a lot of people can work really hard given their tradition and their culture of being hardworking to really rise up. For example, the Chinese people going over the gold rush to America or Australia, they worked really hard to get to where they were. They were not defined by their class. That's in my family history, and that's in a lot of other family histories around the world. Chinese people go overseas to work really hard and to earn money, breaking through that barrier of class, staying strong as that nationality group, and making a future for themselves. And as a result, I don't think people should be seen as solely a class struggle. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Well, that's a very difficult thing. I do think that the problems of inflation are perhaps worse than unemployment, but of course, unemployment is a very big issue. I'll agree with that, but that's only a very tentative agreement. I do think unemployment, we have to fight against unemployment as well, but of course, we could also see the problems of an inflated or especially a hyperinflated economy, which can lead to serious problems. And as a result, I think that controlling unemployment is perhaps less important than controlling inflation, because an inflation can lead to the complete collapse of an entire economy. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulations. I strongly disagree with this. Of course, it's important that we protect the environment, but at the same time, corporations should be able to achieve or pursue their cooperative gains, and then the environment also has to be looked after, but then they could be looked after by other means, by persuasion and via other ways like safety protections. And of course, you could argue about the definition of regulation. Should the government purposely restrict a certain corporation? In that sense, I don't think so. But can the government create general rules over the certain areas? For example, somewhere in Hong Kong, you can't build a certain height. You can't build factories somewhere. There's restrictions to these things. I think that's okay. So it really depends on what they mean by, do they require regulation here? And that is where what I will kind of tie the balance on. But I'll say strongly disagree, because I take it to mean that the individual corporations should be regulated on an individual basis, which I disagree with. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Strongly disagree. To each according to his need is significantly flawed. I'm currently writing about the problems of perfection, which would tie into the idea of the problems of having a general ideal society as the main goal of a society. I might talk about that a bit more in a future video, but that's kind of what I'm working on at this moment. I talk against this idea of this communist idea, which is a Marxian idea, what you see right here. I strongly disagree with it. Yes, I think that everyone should contribute really well, but at the same time, if someone doesn't contribute, they don't deserve to have anything treated to their needs. They have to contribute, they have to work hard. So I think that this is fundamentally a bad idea. The first half of it is good, the second half of it is horribly wrong and could lead to absolute disaster, especially when tied into other Marxian ideas like class struggle, then that really gets a very, very big problem arising, and a very dangerous problem at that as well. The freer the market, the freer the people. I will have to say agree with that. I would say strongly agree with that because, yes, a free market can lead to exploitation at some times. But of course, there's also different arguments about what is actually exploitation, and that's for another video and another discussion. But I do think on a general case, you want a free market. It's a sad reflection on our society that something basic as drinking water is now bottled, branded, and consumer product. I disagree. I think that it is indeed part of a capitalist economy where these things should be sold. Do I think that everyone should be able to have access to clean water? Yes, definitely. But of course, if someone can sell water, then sure, let them sell it. But people should also have the opportunity to access clean drinking water, which is a case in Hong Kong where you have tap water. Of course, that's not free, you have to pay for it, but there's also local fountains and things like that where you can get water. Land should not be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly disagree. I think it should be a commodity to be bought and sold. I think there should be private ownership of land. When that fails, you really start to have a question about who controls land. Well, what does it happen? Do we turn to collectivization? Like, there's a lot of questions which come around the fact of not having private land and the nationalization of land, which leads to significant problems. So now let us talk about, it is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I disagree. I do think that people should be able to make their money the way they want. Of course, some people would be more successful than others, but that's just life in general. I don't say strongly disagree because it is sometimes quite sad to see someone working really hard and not getting anything, whereas someone just manipulates money and they get something. But of course, they might be working hard as well. So, you know, it's very difficult to say, well, that's really regrettable. It's all bad. Good on them for making their money, making their fortunes. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I agree. I do think it's important to protect some things, especially in explicit forms of exploitation. Of course, I don't know too much about the literature surrounding protectionism, but that's just as a general layman kind of approaching it. I generally agree with that. The social responsibility of a company is to deliver a profit to its shareholders. I don't agree with that. I think it's an important part of it, but I don't think it's the only social responsibility. I think a company has to take into consideration the wider government as a whole and the wider community as a whole. Like, they can't lie, they can't spread misinformation, they can't deceive people just to get a benefit for their shareholders. The rich are taxed. To highly disagree. I do think that the more money you get, the more money you should give back to the society. I do think that's generally a good concept. And of course, in Hong Kong, the taxes are a bit different and perhaps lower than taxes other way and in other places around the world. So we'll have to see about that. But I don't necessarily think the rich are too highly taxed. Of course, especially in the situation that I'm living in Hong Kong, which I think is around 15 or 16% or something like that. So those with the ability to pay should have higher access to sanitary healthcare. Yes, strongly agree. I think everyone should have access to healthcare, like government healthcare. That's covered by the taxes you pay. But at the same time, if you want to pay more, I think you should be able to get private hospitals, private doctors, and that's good as well. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. That's a difficult thing. You could definitely ask, well, what do you mean by misleading the public? Is it by giving false information? Is it by giving a different social agenda, which is a very dangerous thing? But I would say that if it means to provide false information, like purposely false factual information, not like philosophy and those kinds of, I have a different opinion than you, then, well, I think you should penalize business for giving false factual information, especially if it's purposeful. If it's not purposeful, then, well, it's just a mistake. But at the same time, if you're spreading false information, then that is bad and dangerous. A genuine free market requires restrictions on predatory multinationals create monopolies. That's a very difficult thing to say because sometimes, well, what does it mean by predator multinationals? Is it just a multinational or is it someone which is exploiting others? Since they have the word predator, I'll assume their meaning it's exploiting other people and exploiting the rights of people. So as a result, I would say I disagree. But if they took away the word predator and just said the ability of multinationals to create monopolies, I'll probably go and say agree. So, and once again, you have those small flips, which really depends on the semantics. So let's go to the next page. Okay, so now we got abortion when women's life is not threatened should always be illegal. I strongly agree. Yes, I said I am quite a liberal and say I should let people do whatever they want, but at the same time, since I do believe that that has the limits of harming another life or harming something else or harming potential of somebody else, then that is the limits of your things. You can do whatever you want with yourself, but not with those around you. So that is definitely a problem. All authority should be questioned. Strongly agree. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Of course, the Bible says you should forgive and you should help. So I would disagree. Of course, I would agree in the sense that sometimes you do have to do that. You have to be strict. You have to have strict punishments. But as a general rule, as a person, I think you should forgive them. I think an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, as more as a justice system is not necessarily wrong, but as a personal interaction with others, it is important. And as a result, since it's a personal social values that we're talking about, I would say disagree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Strongly agree, because theaters and museums are normally private, while these theaters are sometimes private. Of course, if it's public, then maybe that's the case, but at the same time, I think it's important that they own and they also use their own capital and their own money to help develop themselves, and we should not need to help them as well. Of course, you can say museums have educational value, and that might be a bit different than theaters, but we'll see how it goes. And it really depends on the situation, but still I'll say strongly agree. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I would disagree. I think literacy rates are very important. Of course, there's another question about when you want to have that classroom attendance, or how long those schools should be for, and what age you want to have compulsory education. But I think it's important that kids should have literacy, so I disagree with this idea. All people have their rights, but it's better for all that different people should keep to their own kind. I disagree. I don't really understand what it means by different people should keep to their own kind. I think people should be able to interact with people of other classes, other nationalities, and just have different ideas at the same time. Could parents sometimes have to spank their children? That's a very difficult question, but it's difficult. I mean, I think they have to punish them very hard, and it really depends on the child. If the child's really not listening to you after all the reasoning, after everything, then maybe you do. So I'll say agree. And of course, that good parents, we're assuming that they are generally good parents and not trying to abuse their children. So if that's the case, then they're generally good, and that is indeed the only way to teach a child, I think it's agree. You'd rather spank the kid and have them be a better person in the future than not spank them and then they go and do drugs in the gang. So I have to admit that's perhaps good, and it really depends on the situation. Of course, we have that good parents here. So it's natural for children to sometimes keep secrets from their parents. Strongly agree. That is natural. Whether it's good or not is a different thing, but of course it is natural. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Disagree. Depends on the health connotations to that, or whether it's unhealthy. I generally think marijuana and all these other drugs are unhealthy, and as a result, I say disagree, just because I think the government should be able to stop people from doing unhealthy things for them as well. Just like how people outlaw or illegalize suicide, I think. And it's like, well, it's not like you're going to throw the dead person into a cell, but at the same time, you have to make these things illegal to be able to keep them as a healthy and keep them as a safe human being. And as a result, you should be able to illegalize these things as well. So the prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Disagree. I don't think jobs are everything. I think it does indeed help children find jobs, but I don't think that's the main thing. I think finding someone's passion is more important, and creating someone's creativity or something else like that is very important as well. Okay, people with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Strongly disagree. I think people should have generally control who they want to reproduce with. Of course, it might harm the future and the general, the overall, how the child lives, but at the same time, if someone has a serious inheritable disability, but they are able to get married and have children and have a relationship with others, then I don't see why that disease will cripple their child for life, because that kid, if they get the same disease, would be able to have fun, have relationships with others, which is the most important thing. Of course, should that mean that we should encourage it and force people to have reproduction even if they have inheritable diseases? Of course not, but if they are able to have that loving relationship with others despite that disease, I think that means, at least demonstrates, that disability doesn't completely disable you from having a loving, fruitful, and productive life. The most important children is to accept discipline. Agree and disagree. I have to say it's important to accept discipline, but it's not the most important thing. I think there are other things which are more important, so I'll say discipline. There are no savages civilized people. There are only different cultures. Strongly disagree. Some cultures are objectively, morally objectable or have objective problems with them. Those who are able to work and refuse opportunity should not expect. Strongly agree. You have to carry your own weight. If you're not carrying your own weight, just get out and don't expect any help. You have to give your best. It's a different thing for giving it all and not working and it failing, And that is, I think, that if you gave it your best and it completely failed, you should get society support. But if you're not working and you're just wasting your life away and also wasting your position in society, don't expect any help from society. When you're troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. That's very bad, because I think that sometimes making the use of your troubled moments is a very good source of profundity and inspiration. So I think that's definitely wrong. I think you should think about your troubles and solve them. Don't push them away, solve them, learn from them, and make yourself a better person. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new community. Disagree. I think that people can build up a position for themselves. Is it more difficult? Yes, but is it impossible? No. What's good for the most corporations is ultimately most good for us. Disagree. I think that there are some very selfish corporations which carry around things. Do I necessarily think we should stop those corporations? No, but at the same time, sometimes they're there and they don't do any good for us. No broadcasting institutions, however independent it is, should receive public funding. I disagree on the condition that it remains neutral. If it does change its opinion via public funding, then of course you should stop it. But at the same time, since there is that clause of however independent its content, assume it's very independent, well, it should be able to receive public funding, of course, if the public want to pay for it. So, of course, that is the disagree. I don't agree with this. I think that they should be able to receive public funding as long as they remain independent and objective. So, how do I view wider society? Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Disagree. I don't live in any scenario where there is significant counterterrorism measures, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that is too bad. Significance of advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all arguments that delay process. I actually strongly agree with that. I don't think it's good, but of course I do think that a one-party state's only advantage is really that, and it's more direct. So yes, it is a significant advantage, but at the same time, it's a bad and significant advantage, if you get what I mean. It's a very pedantic difference, but it does make a difference about how I approach a question. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Disagree. I think that even good people can sometimes get on the wrong side of different things as well. So as a result, I disagree with this notion. Death penalty should be an option. Strongly disagree, because I think rehabilitation is very important. Even if they are going to stay in jail for life, at least they can have spiritual and personal change, which is definitely very valuable. In a civilized society, one must have people above completely agree there is a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is very, very important. Abstract art doesn't represent anything, shouldn't be considered as an art at all. Strongly, I disagree. I think art is an expression. More on that in my discussion with Warren Jew, Thinker's Kitchen, on a previous video. I'll put a card up for that in the top, and you could go check that out afterwards. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than writer and artist. Strongly disagree. I think that the writer and the artist provide a model and a beauty that is significantly incomparable with the business person and the manufacturer. Of course, the business person and the manufacturer are important, but I think that that's very different from the writer and the artist. They have both jobs. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is homemakers. I mean, I have to say that mothers are perhaps better at homemaking because of their psychological benefits. You can go search big 5 psychology traits. That's just hard facts or just scientific or psychological facts. They just have to deal with those traits, make them better as homemakers. But at the same time, I disagree, because I think people can have careers as well. But of course, if they have a child, then of course, I think anyone, whether you're a man or a woman, you're a mother or a father, you should have your first duty to the child as well. So multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of demand. Disagree. I think that the fact that they are using that as a way to earn money, as a capital for those developing countries, means that there are benefits arising from it, and I don't think it's necessarily exploitation that we see here. Making peace with the establishment is an important part of maturity. Strongly disagree. I don't think that got anything to do with maturity. You can be very mature and still disagree with the establishment, because sometimes the establishment is really horrible. Now let's turn to religious propositions. That's going to be interesting. Astrology accurately explains many things. Disagree. I don't think it's very accurate. You cannot be moral without being religious. You can't be moral without having a religious basis, but you can be moral with having a religious basis but not being religious, if you get what I mean. It's a very interesting and pedantic kind of small shift, but I'll agree because of that small kind of, you need the religious in order to provide that idea of a hierarchy and transcendence, but at the same time, you don't need to be religious to understand that concept, and you will still have it subconsciously anyways. So I'll say I agree with this concept, and more about that you can check out my discussion with Warren Ju on the transcendent, which I'll also put a card to in the top. Charity is better than society, strongly agree, because of course charity is done freely and it can really help people out. Some people are naturally unlucky, strongly agree. You might just have natural disadvantages, either the family you're born into or your different situations, your talents. You don't have talent in some ways, and that's unlucky, but you have to work hard to make up for that. There's nothing else you can do about it. It's important that my child's school instills religious values, strongly agree, because I think most of the values are currently religious, and regardless, and I don't necessarily think you should brainwash kids to make them Christian or Buddhist or whatever you want, but at the same time I think values are very important, especially religious ones. Finally, a look at sex. Sex outside marriages, I agree with that. Same-sex couples should not be excluded. I strongly agree. Well, I'll say I agree with that. I don't think it's the best for the child, because I think that the fact of having a male and a woman is helping you understand the different characteristics and having a greater understanding of both sexes. So I do think that it's more advantage to have a heterosexual marriage. But of course, I as someone who I think is quite liberal or open in the kind of the political scheme, I do think should be allowed. Whether I agree with it personally is a different thing. If this was under the personal social values, I'll probably put it on the other side, on the disagree. But since it is a more broad thing about legal social actions, I will be on the agree side. Pornography, legal for, I strongly agree. I think that, do I agree with it personally? No, but at the same time, is it like, should we regulate it? Well, that's a different thing. The same goes for private bedroom things. It should be consenting. And as long as that's the case, I don't see any problem with it. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I disagree with that. I think that people can feel naturally homosexual. Whether I think feeling natural is a good reason to do something is a complete different conversation. But of course, I think you can naturally be homosexual. Openness about sex has gone too far. But I think open sex has gone too far. Strongly agree. But the discussion about it, not necessarily. But I'll say agree, just because I think it is perhaps a kind of a dubious question. Of course, this is not the most accurate test ever, because some of the questions are a bit kind of restrictive, and I'll probably have put like an other kind of thing, or just rephrase the question. But of course, you can't do that in this test. Let's see where I stand. So it goes all about that. Let's see where we are. I am a lib-right, like I expected. I'm kind of 3 on the left and also more on the social libertarian views. So that's kind of my beliefs. I'm not too surprised. I am quite a liberal person, I think, and I'm also quite right-leaning in the sense of economic and also philosophy and political views. So that's kind of where it goes. Hope you enjoy this video. Hope you stay safe. Like always, God bless. I'll see you in the next one. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what else you want me to do in the future. Hope you've enjoyed. Feel free to do it yourself. The test, I'll put the link in the description below. And let me know what you got in the comment section below. Have a good one. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.